Hello, everyone, and welcome to my YouTube channel. So, a really shocking news came out late last night that Saudi Arabia and Pakistan have signed a mutual defense pact. It's essentially a NATO style pact where the attack on one country will be considered as a attack on the other country. So, any attack by, say, the Houthis or Iran on Saudi Arabia would be considered as an attack on Pakistan by extension. And any attack on Pakistan by India, which quite frankly would in any case come as a retaliation to a misadventure or a terrorist conspiracy by Pakistan, will be considered as an attack on Saudi Arabia. So, this is the reason, my friends. This is the reason why I have always been an advocate of strong India Iran relations rather than strong India GCC relations, simply because I know that GCC, especially Saudi Arabia, is one of the big pillars of the global American empire, as we will discuss in this video. In fact, even Pakistan is a pillar of the global American empire, be it as useless as it is, be it as unproductive as it is. Its location and its nuclear arsenal and its willingness to be used as a frontier state always in America's wars has proved to be very beneficial for the Americans many a times. So, without further ado, let us dive deep into the reasons and the strategic implications of this pact. First of all, we must realize, as I said, that these countries both act on behest of America. Now, the reason is that in June, we see that the US and Israel, especially Israel, bit off more than they could chew. They clearly underestimated the power that Iran brings to the table, and hence we saw missile strikes by Iran landing in the heart of Tel Aviv, in the heart of Ashkelon, and in Haifa, and many other Israeli cities. Essentially, it was a never before scenario. You never have seen since 1945 a US ally, or since 1971, I should say, a US ally being pushed back so hard by a member of the global south. It was a totally unforeseen scenario for our generation. So now the US is basically trying to galvanize support in the region. You see that even Turkey, for that matter, has gotten a free way on Russian oil. It has not been tariffed, it has not been trash talked, it has not been warned. Whereas Turkey even imports natural gas in large quantities from Russia. When it comes to importing natural gas and oil, Turkey comes in the top five in both these categories, natural gas and oil from Russia, that is. But Turkey has not been accountable or hasn't faced any consequences. Why? Because we need to realize the target is Tehran. A regime change in Iran is the dream of the GAE since 1979. We need to see this, that Turkey, with its location right next to Iran, with its alliance with Azerbaijan, would come in very handy on any future attack on Iran. This June attack was not the last time. The Americans just forced the Israelis to retreat and to recalibrate their strategy. They are licking their wounds, but surely they are preparing for war. It is a fact that Turkey will come in very handy in this case. Hence, no kind of repercussions for the Turks. And plus, the Turks have received a gift, rather, I would say. The pact between Azerbaijan and Armenia that destroys Armenian sovereignty on its southern tip, and the recognition of the so called Zengezur corridor between Armenia and Azerbaijan would essentially mean that Iran and Armenia are cut off. And that region, the southern tip of Armenia, you can see it marked on the map. It is Azeri territory in all but name. Only on the map it shows it's Armenia, but for all intensive purposes, it is Azerbaijan and Turkey right now. So that's one point. Coming back to the Saudis and the Pakistanis. So even Saudi will come in handy as an important strategic base. We need to realize that after the destruction of the Hezbollah and after the war in Gaza, two of Iran's pillars, the Hezbollah and Hamas, have been destroyed. Then it's only the Houthis of Yemen which Tehran can use strategically to strike back. And Saudi Arabia being vehemently behind the US is important. Plus, we need to see that Saudi Arabia helps in maintaining the primacy of the US dollar. Oil is the most essential commodity. It has been so since it was first discovered in the early 1930s. It still retains much of its influence today. So, the pact, the petrodollar pact that was signed during President Nixon, and I think in the Saudis it was King Faisal at that time. The petrodollar pact ensuring that the Saudis and even other GCC countries essentially sell their oil to any third party or even the US using only US dollars would ensure that a huge amount of transactions take place in this currency, and hence the influence of the dollar will be maintained. Which is why President Trump was so against India Russia oil trade, by the way, because we were doing it in rupees, in ruble, even yuan many a times, which is the Chinese currency. So clearly, 40 billion US dollars worth of annual trade happening in a currency that's not the US dollar would, to some extent, hit the US dollar's primacy. And India was unreasonably targeted just for this reason. Now, President Trump seems to have surrendered yesterday from his tweet wishing Prime Minister Modi on his birthday. This is the best possible gift he could have gotten. But let's come to that in another video. So, that was the thing, my friends. Hence, I've always been advocating for strong relations and better relations with Iran and Russia, not with Saudi, Israel, or America. Because again, this strategic pact is to benefit Israel, so that if Iran was to attack the Saudis, Pakistan would get no reason, just a treaty to enter that war. So it will be forced into America's war. So all Pakistanis who are kind of celebrating and dancing over this, well, first of all, you always were better allies with the Saudis. We never were allies with the Saudis. We know how the Saudis ideologically supported terrorism in Kashmir. We know how they funded your nuclear program. We know how they supported essentially Daesh and Al Qaeda in Syria. We know all that. Hence, we never saw them as allies, except for the novice geopolitical experts born essentially in the past few years. Except for them, deep strategic thinkers never really saw Saudis as allies. We always saw Iran as our great ally in the OIC and in West Asia in particular. So, no need to dance about this. Plus, you guys are getting sucked into America's war. Just see what happens to you now. You need to see that if you intervene on any war on Iran on behalf of the Saudis, you will see the Khyber Shikan or the Fatah missiles landing right into your heart. And plus, Iran will not be satisfied by launching just 50 missiles in a night. Let me tell you that. You can have 500 coming at you at one time. You just see what happens to you now. So that's what the Pakistanis are about. So nothing to worry, my dear friends. It's no change in the order in the Middle East. It's essentially a reaffirmation of the old order, the way it already was. We are essentially back to 1980s politics, where it's the entire you can say GCC, Pakistan, and America on one side, and it's the Russians and Indians on the other. Iran obviously was not that relevant during the Afghan war because they were engaged in their own internal and external problems, so they didn't have much involvement in the Afghan war. But yes, the realities are essentially that. And one more thing I must say, that people often forget that the weapons were provided by the US when it comes to the Afghan conspiracy against the Soviets. The frontier was Pakistan, but the finances and the ideology was from Saudi Arabia. We need to realize that. And had India back then stood as vehemently as we are with Russia during its war in Ukraine, you would have seen the Russian flag fly on Lahore today. I've got no doubts about it. In fact, the Soviet flag, I must say, the Soviet Union would have never broken down. So, better late than never. India and Russia are essentially giving back to the Saudis for what they did to the USSR back in the mid 80s. You need to see that because of India Russia trade, Oil prices have remained restricted. Oil is the oxygen for Saudi economy. And Aramco, its number one company, one of the top oil companies in the world, has been losing profits year after year. It's not in a loss, but past 8 to 10 quarters at least, they've seen their profits decline. If these trends continue, very, very soon, they'll slip into a loss. And that is where you see the Saudi economy go on a ventilator. In fact, in the past 12 to 10 to 12 years, their forex reserves have declined from 750 billion USD to just 400 billion USD right now. So decline of almost 50%. It's already in a recession. India and Russia, we need to increase Russian oil imports from just 45% of our total oil imports to around 65, 70, 75%. And that's where you see the accelerated death of the Saudi economy and in extension the collapse of the global American empire in the Middle East. Thank you so much, friends.